17 months up there, the Korean armistice stopped things over there, so they gave me an early release, and then I was transferred to the weekend warrior bit at Home and Field in St. Paul, and so then there was a case where I had to put in a 2-week camp deal down at Camp Douglas in Wisconsin, and that was I didn't care for that one very much at all, because it involved too big an outfit, and it was a dog-eat-dog deal, and they I felt that for one thing, the mess hall, I think the mess sergeants were stealing them blind of food, because they didn't ever seem to have enough food to go around, and it's just the whole bit down there was bad news as far as I was concerned. So when I got through with my when I got through with my time 4-year deal, that was enough. They had a good deal. You sign up for, you put in like 20 years, and you get a retire at half pay. Put in 30 years, you retire at full pay, and so it was a lot of guys went in for it, and it was okay, but I wanted my independence. I didn't. I was tired of that weekend warrior stuff. And then there was Denny Springer, that was in the Air Force radar station with me, and I got acquainted with him when I guess I was did some work on his car or something, and anyway, he was going home on a 3-day pass, and so I went with him, rode with him on that trip, and we got acquainted, and turns out that he was going with a Peterson girl, Carol Peterson, that lived up by 32nd and Fillmore, maybe something up close to on the hill up there on St. Anthony Boulevard, and anyhow, it turns out that Carol Peterson, her name was a good friend to Carol Tima. They were in Job's Daughters together or something like that, and so eventually, when Arla and I and Danny and Carol, when we were out together, of course, we were all well acquainted, and eventually Danny married Carol, and then in 1953 in February 14th, I guess it was, Valentine's Valentine's Day. Arla and I had been going together off and on for years, so we finally decided we'd get married. And so I had given her a ring, and then we proceeded to hang together and save our money. We were both working. She was working for now I can't think of it, but anyway, I was still at Sullivan's, and we saved every penny we could get our hands on, and our entertainment was mostly watching television over at her house, her dad's house, I should say. And then we were able to gather enough money to pay down on a new house, the one on Jackson Street. When I say new, actually it was a year old. The Forsmark family had built it, and well, they didn't build it, they had it built by Carl Bennett Construction. But anyway, he worked for Glidden Paint, and they were transferring him to Mankato. And so it the case where he had to sell the house, and we decided that, if we can't pay the rent, they'd throw us out. If we can't pay for payments on a house, we get at least to live there a year before they can throw us out. So anyway, we couldn't lose, and so we actually bought the house before we were married, because we couldn't get the hall for the wedding until November 7th. So November 7th is when we got married, and it's spoiled deer hunting for a lot of my friends, but we pulled it off. And so that's how we got our start. And then after a couple of years, that was in 53, and in 2 years later, the Skelly Oil Company built a station on 40th and 6th Street, and they wanted me to open her up and go into business. And so I talked I was going to talk Pachaki into going with me first, and he had reservations. It was too much of a gamble as far as he was concerned, and so Johnny Godava was the next one I asked to come in with me. And so it was a case where I had a problem getting him in, because he was hanging out in all beer joints in his spare time all the time, and the Merchants and all the a bunch of other good Polish people were friends of his. They were mostly ball players and that, but they, after the game, they go into one of the joints in the Heights and have a few beers and so on. And so anyway, the company, their word was that he was a heavy drinker, and so they didn't really want him at first, but I talked him into it, and Johnny borrowed the money from his brother Frank, and I borrowed the money from Arla's dad Clarence. We needed $5,000 to get started. At least that's the way I added it up, and to get inventory and get a good start. I figured that that's what we needed, and so that's how we started it. And so we bought an old tow truck, used one, bought a bunch of used tools, and old George Cease had a pure oil station over on Highway 36 by Robbinsdale over there, and he was going out of business, so I pretty much bought him out on tools and equipment and test equipment and that, and then so we opened our doors and away we went, and it was a tough battle for over the years. One price war after another on gasoline, and it long hours of working, and it was tough sledding, and then on top of that, about the time we getting our foothold and going, the doggone Vietnam War, that entanglement put the workers at such a level that we couldn't find any help, and the help we did get was very questionable from time to time, and so it was a case where we survived and we made a living, but as far as ever really getting rich, like a few of the guys had a good spot, really probably did get somewhat rich. The oil company had figured that 40th Avenue was going to be a county road stretched on across to Camden, across the railroad tracks that to the west, and of course they changed their mind on that, and they went up to 44th and crossed over instead. So that put a lot of business over on 44th and Central in a good spot, but as far as we were concerned, we ended up on a sort of a dead-end street, and our business was strictly local, and it was okay. We survived for a long time, and after 30 years, the oil company decided that was not paying, and so they bought us out, and that was it. My experience with the oil companies over the years were increasingly challenging. At first, the Skelly Oil Company had a complete line of just about everything. They dealt in supplies of belts and hoses and ignition supplies and just about everything you would need. But they soon found that the competition was a little stiff and that, except for what they called TBA, which was tires, batteries, and accessories. And the accessories boiled down to antifreeze and oil and I guess tires and batteries, antifreeze, oil, and that was pretty much it. But that was the bigger ticket items, and so there was a lot of investment involved in that stuff, and the one that burned us the worst was the damn tires. Skelly was having BF Goodrich make their hood line tire, and the hood was had a pretty good reputation, but when the industry started using nylon, they decided that all hood tires would be made out of nylon, and this was a major, big mistake. The nylon, of course, was the toughest tread they could use, but it was susceptible to taking a set. Well, a guy buy himself a nice new set of nylon tires and find out that, boy, he's really got a strong, safe tire, except that he'd go wheeling down the highway and get them nice and hot and come pulling into his nice, cool garage and shut her down, and next morning back out of the driveway and down the street, ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. Tires would, every flat spot, every spot he sat on, and they would do this for about 2 miles. Well, that the oil company says, well, that's the bounce of safety. And most of the people in the cities, by the time they got 2 miles, they were where they were going. So that meant that they've got 2 miles that way and 2 miles back again of bumpy tires. And so that just killed us. The people, they'd come back after buying a set of tires and they wanted balanced because it's getting that thump. Well, we recheck the balancing for them and then make all kinds of excuses and finally tell them that, there's really nothing you can do. You got to live with that thump. Well, they didn't live with it very long. They buy their tires somewhere else, and so that was really a bummer, and it cost us real bad. And so it was a case where the batteries was another thing. The Globe Union was making batteries for Skelly. Well, it was a terrific battery, one of the best. And so then they come up with the idea of making universal type batteries where we could have a few batteries that would fit everything. And there was another big blunder. First of all, the batteries were one of the first what they call a dry charge battery. That when you put the acid in them, it would be a brand new battery ready to go. And this was real fine, except that the first ones they made, they somehow retained voltage so high that they wouldn't take a charge. So the guy'd drive off with a new battery, and about a month later, the battery would be totally dead and wouldn't take a charge. It had voltage, too high a voltage retained, and so that meant that the amperage couldn't get back into them from the charging system. And so we had to replace all the batteries that we sold and give the guy a new battery and a free service call to get him home again and whatever. And so that was bad news. And then just as bad as that was the battery case problem. They had about 4 sizes of batteries that were supposed to fit everything, and so some had to have a special case to hold them in, adapters and that were well, that ends up costing money for that too. So when we got through, that battery mess was a mess, and so anyway, these things were challenging, and like Johnny don't gripe much, but I did, and I let them know from time to time that they better change things and get on the ball and whatever, because this was killing us. And so they weren't too happy with me. They didn't even want to talk to me most of the time, and so the end result was that we ended up in many cases doing things our way. We stopped opening Sundays. We kept closed on Sundays and cut our hours back on daytime and so forth. And when they would threaten us with whatever they could threaten about, I always challenged them and said, go ahead. But anyway, nothing ever happened. I always did things my way, and John and I like I say, did things pretty much our way. When they pulled off that fake fuel shortage bit, that was another killer. We had built our business to where we were finally making money, and we started rationing our gas, and they come up with some real nifty rules. Any new gas station could get all the gas they wanted, and the older stations got gas proportionally to how much they had sold years before or whatever, and they get to 80% or something, 70% of that, and they come up with a bunch of trick figures to pretty much run us dry. And so here's this brand new gas station down on 32nd and University that's pumping gas like mad because they get all they want, and we go to dry because they won't deliver. And all the truckers and all the drivers always said, nobody ever ran out of gas. The pipeline is, they got all the gas that they can ever handle. Storage tanks were overfilled, and so it was a ploy to actually the real story behind it, as we understand it, was that the environmentalists were fighting the pipeline in Alaska, and most of these oil companies had big money invested in that pile of pipe and products, supplies and equipment and everything up there rusting in Alaska, and so they to force the issue on the environmentalists and the politicians and the public, they created that gas shortage, and boy, it didn't take much of that for the people to start screaming like mad all around, and of course, that opened things up. The pipeline went through, and gas all of a sudden pumps are full again, and so and then of course the prices went up and all that sort of thing, and then at about the same time they started wiping out the small stations like ours and putting in the big self pumpers and so forth, and it's the way it went, and so it a case where John and I got wiped out in 1985, and that we had from 55 till 85 we were in business, and so from there on John got a job with the county working out at Chamonix Golf Course, and I went over to Champion Auto and worked for Norleen. Norleen was the owner there at the time, and so I was over there for 4 years, and when my back went out, and since my back went out for the last 10 years, I've been loafing, buttering and loafing and doing as I want to do, as if I can do it. And I'm still very happy about it. Speaking of my back problem, I got to let you know that it originated, to the best of my recollection, my first back problem came about when I fell down a flight of stairs at the old chicken farm. I think it was a Saturday morning or something. There wasn't anybody else around, and I had some work to get done, and so anyway, I was going from one level to the next level, going down, and there was the stairwell was real steep steps, and it was a case where I started down the steps, and my feet just going too fast, and I couldn't stop. It was like going down a ladder, and my rear end it was a case where my butt just banged on every one of those steps to I got to the bottom, and when I hit the bottom, I couldn't get up. I was sort of paralyzed for, I don't know, maybe, I thought it was about half an hour. It might have only been 10 minutes, I don't know. But anyway, eventually it sort of straightened out, and I was able to stand up and walk. And so I just made my way home and felt stupid about falling down those steps. Rather than make a deal out of it, I never told anybody. But then, years later, I had another incident. I was riding my little Indian motorcycle at noon hour, and I ran into old Daune that had the Reliable Sickle Shop, and he says, "Follow me," and we scooted on over to the hills around old Nick Helm's sand pit, and this was over toward the Burlington Northern rail yards, but at the time there was a lot of it was open hills back there, and they had, I don't know exactly how they got that way, but I think a lot of it was dug out. They'd dig a big pit here and one there and so forth. But anyway, they were sickle drivers would go up and down these steep hills and around, and they had trails there, and so he was going up and down, and I was following him, but on this one he went up and over, and I didn't know that the other side was practically a straight drop off, and so I went hay-bailing up that a little too fast, and so instead of rolling down the other side, I went flying over the top and went straight down. And when I hit the bottom, the stirrups that were under my feet were just bent straight down, and because I tried to stand instead of being sitting when I hit, and anyway, the stirrups went straight down, and I still hit my butt on the seat so hard that it was really hurt, and so then I felt that same pain in my back, and so then from there it was a long time after that my next train came when I was up here at the lake, and we were going to move the water bike, and it was up here not too far from the cabin, but anyway, we were going to park it up here out of the way, and so Clarence had one corner, and Sel had another corner, and Arla had a corner, and I had a corner, and we all lifted it and set it down, and then Arla said, well, let's put it over here, a little further over, and about this time, Sel said, oh, I've got to go to the toilet, and so Arla and Clarence were on the other end, and so I reached over to in the middle of the thing, and took a hold of the whole side. And about the time we took about 3 steps, Arla says, oh, it's too heavy, and she dropped her corner. And so Clarence and I were on the rest of that bike, and I'd been just taking a step at the time that happened, and I just folded, and pain streaking up my back. or so. Again, it seemed to straighten out and level out. Okay, well, all right. And so that was fine. But the next morning at the gas station, I went to lift a can of gas into the trunk of a car. And as I swung that gas, one leg sort of just the pain shot down that, and that was it. From that time on, my back has never been good. And chiropractors would straighten it out for a short time, and by the time I get home, the pain would be back again. And so it wasn't too long. I had a lumbar laminectomy, they called it, and where I had to scoop out the garbage in the lower disc, I guess. And so that was the start of my back trouble. And then it, like I said, about in '89, the second and third discs mushed out. That time, exactly what caused that, I'm not sure. Everybody wanted me to blame the work about it, but I think that the damage had been done. Although I did have I was working on a truck transmission shortly before it went out again, and that transmission was a heavy one, and I did do a little bit of kind of straining to get that in, and but it was a case where even then there was a day or two later that my pain started coming back into my left leg, and so anyway, that was story of my back trouble. And after the last operation, MRIs showed that the deterioration of the spinal casing is such that it's never going to be in good shape, and of course that's just about the way it is. I got to be real careful, or I'm back in bed for a while to let it rest up, but I get by fine, so doing great. I guess over the years I've been pretty healthy. Ever since I was a little kid, I've had a couple of teeth pulled, and somewhere in 1930, I think it was around 36, I must have had some problem, my hearing or something. I don't remember what it was, but anyway, Ma took me to the university hospital, and they said I needed a tonsillectomy, so they ripped my tonsils out, and that, I was looking forward to that day because they showed me the toy room they had, that as soon as I had my operation, I could play in that toy room. Well, hell, next morning I get the operation and I'm out for the day, and the next day when I was about ready to go to the toy room, about the time Ma come down to pick me up, and so I never did check that toy room where they had all kinds of, everything everything from electric train to hobby horses and stuff in there, that I would have liked to checked out. But anyhow, the operation left me with a sore throat, so I didn't care to eat much for a couple of days, and then I got over that okay. And I guess the next serious operation I had was about the time I think it was my gallbladder. I had an accident. The truck, the old dual-tired Chevy 1936 truck. We were putting tire chains on it, and it fell off the hoist and jammed me against an oil barrel, and what it amounted to is it just squeezed me down to where it busted a rib or two, and left a big scar on my shoulder, and knocked the wind out of me, so I couldn't breathe. And of course, I thought I was rolling around trying to breathe. Thought I was going to die, and so naturally, of course, Doc Blumenthal only lives 100 yards up the street, so quick call him, and so what happens? He don't show up at all. He just called St. Andrew's Hospital and have them send the ambulance out to pick me up, and of course, the ambulance got to the 36 and Central, and the freight train was going there, so they had to wait for that. And by the time they got to pick me up, I was breathing good, and outside of the pain, I think mostly from my ribs, I was back okay again. But anyway, they hauled me down to the hospital, and that's when the fight began. The first thing they wanted to do was worry about my right shoulder that had these big bruises on it, and they wouldn't listen to me about my pain down my ribs. They kept x-raying my shoulder, and so anyway, then they wouldn't give me any painkillers because they couldn't do it without a doctor's orders, without my doctor's orders, and he didn't show up, and that was on that was Friday, and he didn't show up, and but I complained so much about the pain that he let him finally give me a shot of some kind to kill the pain. And out of the 15 x-rays, they never did find anything wrong, but years later, these lumps down on my where the pain was, sort of a expansion on my ribs. I'm sure I had a rib or two broken, and then anyway, when I was in the hospital, that was a Friday. Well, of course, he didn't show up Friday. Well, they kept telling me, well, he'll be in tomorrow. Well, and then come to find out, he don't work on Saturdays and Sundays, so it was going to be Monday before he was going to show up. tells you what that damn Jewish doctor down the street was worth. he was going to wait and make sure I was in good shape before he couldn't get blamed for anything. And anyway, by noon Saturday, I decided that this isn't going anywhere. This is stupid, and so I told him, called Arlen, told her to come get me, and I told him I'm leaving, and they said you can't leave. And I said, why not? Well, you're released by your doctor. And I said, hell, he ain't checked me in yet. And I said, it don't make any difference. I'm going home. And if you want to pick up the bill, I'll pay you. Otherwise, I'm going one way or another. And oh, geez, they were really shook. But that's what happened. Darla come down, and I made him add up a bill, and I paid it, and left. And then shit really hit the fan when I filled out the accident report. Just happens that I had an accident insurance. And, of course, that whole mess had me so riled up that I didn't think straight about that insurance deal. And so the fact that I left the hospital and didn't wait for a doctor's prescriptions or anything, they were able to pull out of that insurance claim with real easy, and I would have been able to bleed up for a while on that if I really would have played the game. But old Blumenthal made me so damn mad, and when I filled out the report, of course, I didn't pull any punches. I let him know that just what happened, and old Doc Blumenthal, he never wanted to talk to me again. But that was one of my experiences with doctors, and so I've decided that when you go to the doctor, he says, how are you? Well, that's just about it. He don't know until you tell him. And to this day, I operate pretty much the same way. When I'm in trouble, I need him, but otherwise, the best thing is to stay healthy in the first place, and then you don't need them. I guess I needed them real bad though when my gallbladder went out. I had a gallstone jamming but then again, it was kind of the same thing. Darla took me to I think it was Fairview Hospital, and they kept telling me, kept talking about stomach ulcers. You got stomach ulcers. Ulcers, hell, I never had any stomach trouble. I got this pain there, though, and my stomach's blowing up. And they couldn't give me anything for pain either because my doctor wasn't authorizing it yet. And so finally, Doc Good got down there, and by the time he got there, and he gave me some kind of a shot, I think, for the pain, and then they took an X-ray, and he says, well, it's a